lot of people. I don't know. Maybe it's not the most exciting topic. But certainly one you probably have had experience with, right? Insurance. Right, so we'll talk about the concept of property, which is a little different than the law than you might think it is, distinguishing personal versus real property. We'll look at how property can be held or owned. We'll look at gifts and bailments, and then insurable interest and the elements of an insurance policy, which isn't entirely new. If you have the basis of contracts, insurance policies are contracts. So it's just what's in the insurance policy that may be a little new to you. So here's a legal definition of what property is. Legally protected rights and interests a person has in something. And I think of it as bundles of rights. Like you might see a house or a laptop. I see just bundles of rights that you have, right? So what kind of things can you do with property if you have the biggest bundle of rights you could have? What could you do with your property? Sell it, lease it, rent it. What else could you do with your property? Come on, get creative. Destroy it, good, you're right. Well, you know, maybe you wouldn't want to do that to your laptop. Maybe you would. What else? You could modify it, change. If it's yours, you could change it however you want, soup it up. Everybody wants a souped up laptop, right? What else could you could give it away? Give it away, right? You could do all those things with it. You could pretty much do anything you want with it, short of something that's illegal, right? I heard an interesting one on the news yesterday that at any border now, under the law, it's authorized that they can seize your laptop without a warrant or anything. And not only that, but they can then ship it to some other site for it to be examined. Yeah, I mean, if you think about that, you better make sure you don't have anything. You don't want somebody to eventually get on your laptop, because usually the way things work are if they're going to inspect it, they inspect it on site, and they have some reason to go into the laptop and look at it. But now they can pretty much just seize it and ship it somewhere else, and who knows when you're going to actually get it back, and it's your property. What was that called in the chapter when somebody else is holding your stuff and they have an obligation to get it back to you? I'll give you a hint. It's one of the 3 titles to the chapter. Personal property, bailments, or insurance. What does it sound like? Bailment, yes, good. So they would have some kind of obligation to take care of your laptop. Nah. I ever tell you a story about them seizing our luggage on our trip to Disney World? We were going to this resort where they had a kitchen, and my wife was determined to save money by packing a suitcase full of food. Right? I said, honey, I don't think this is going to end out too well. She's like, well, then we're going to get there, we're going to have this kitchen, and then we're going to have to order food and stuff in. Let's just take the stuff down with us. I said, all righty. And I was a little concerned when I saw her packing a big bag of white powder, and shoving it into the luggage. I don't remember what it was now. It was either pancake mix or soap, one or the other, right? So sure enough, we get down there, and none of our luggage shows up. So here we are in Disney World. It is freezing, right? We got nothing. And a few days later, it did show up, just busted up, taped with Homeland Security stickers all around it. I said, I told you, you pack white powder in one of your luggage, and it's bound to get seized and not handled very well. So, I think the airport has an obligation to kind of get you your stuff back in a timely manner and make sure it's not totally destroyed. Apparently, Homeland Security doesn't have that same obligation. So, what is the difference between real, what is real property? What would you say is real property? Not real as in fictional or fake or real, but real as in land, things that are built on the land, right? Like homes or buildings. So if that's real property, what's personal property?
Items.
Like? Yeah, it's probably easier than like trying to name to me everything that's personal property to just say what the book says, and that's what?
Movable.
Yeah, they define it as if it's not real property and it's movable, it's personal property. So pretty much everything that isn't real property is personal property, and they try to define it as immovable, real, personal, movable. I have a little bit of problem with that, because I don't think that really holds up. Like, isn't real property movable? Haven't you seen a house going down the road?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have. I bet somebody has seen a building move or a house move. Or land. Can you move land? Give me a shovel. Right? Yeah, you can move it. But basically it's harder. Right? You don't see people just carrying their houses around or carrying a bunch of dirt around. So, and personal property, I would say in some situations it's so large and bulky or affixed to something it would be difficult to move. But generally that's the way it works, and we can have ownership in any of those things. And we're going to focus on, in this chapter, acquiring ownership over personal property, and then spending a little time, in that context talking about the difference between lost, mislaid, or abandoned under the law, because I don't know if everybody really thinks about this. They might think generally as everything is lost. Like you've probably heard that term lost before. We're gonna get a little nitpicky about the differences there, especially on a final exam. You'll probably see something along those lines. So here's that bundle I was talking about. You guys see things, I see bundles. Kind of like that kid in the movie that saw dead people. What was that movie? Sixth Sense. So I see, if something is yours and you own it outright, you have the biggest bundle of rights. You could possess it, sell it, give it away, lease it, destroy it. Like I said, anything that's not illegal to do with it. Like you can own a home, but you're not supposed to burn it down, right? But short of that, you could add on to it. You could lease it out. You could do all these different things. Now, here's where things get a little weird, because these are terms that you don't generally see, and people usually don't talk like this. Fee simple. This biggest bundle of rights you can have is called fee simple. It has a long history as to why it's called that. But just think of fee simple as the biggest bundle of rights you can have. If you've got this, you've got everything that somebody could have to property. And we'll learn more about that in chapter 36, right? Wrong, there's no chapter 36. This is apparently the expanded version of the textbook. So we'll learn about the real property more in the next chapter, right? Chapter 24. So fee simple is defined as the maximum possible estate that you can have in property. And that goes on forever, sort of. That's the theory, right? You don't care too much about that because you don't go on forever in terms of owning property. But the property does, unless it's destroyed and no longer. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But how you own property with someone else can be different. So it's not always the case that one person owns one thing, right? Real property or a car. Anybody own a car? Right? Anybody own it with anybody else? Yeah, I do. Right? So that if you're going to own property with someone else, think of the business setting. How you and a partner own a building or equipment or something like that. There are different ways that you can own it. basically because you'd have different rights to it if you sell it or if you die. And the first one is called a tenancy in common. Let's say A and B, you and somebody else own property together as tenants in common. That means you have an undivided interest in it. Like think about a house or a building. An undivided interest means you share in the ownership of it, but it's not split down the middle. Or it's not you own the basement, I own the first floor, right? You own an undivided interest in the whole thing. Usually, unless it says something specific, half, right? You own half, but it's not specific as to which half. So what's so special about a tenancy in common? If one of the tenants dies, what happens to their interest, according to that drawing up there? It passes to their heir, which might be the way people think all property goes. You die and whatever you own goes to your heirs. Do you guys think that? Does that seem logical? If I die and I have people who survive me who are related to me, they get my stuff? Seems like a logical thing, but in reality that may not happen. It may not happen because the state doesn't want it to happen that way, or because you've directed it not to happen that way, or you own the property in ways where it's not going to go that way. Right. It may not ever make it to your heirs, right? So it ends up going to someone else who has a secured interest in it. So if you own it as a tenant in common, then your undivided interest passes to your heirs. And notice the last bullet there. The new owner is A and C. Now think about that in the business setting. You and someone else own a building together. They die. Who's your new partner? Right, C. Who's C? Who knows? Who could C be?
I got it.
What's that? Oh, okay. Thanks. Woohoo! So, C could be somebody's kid, somebody who knows nothing about the business, doesn't care about the business, doesn't want it, or, worse yet, somebody who does want it but shouldn't be running a business. And now you're working with them. So if you own a business and you own assets together with someone else, what do you want to make sure you do?
You can buy it out.
Have an agreement as to what happens with it if you die or they die, right? Or you try to sell or they sell, yeah.
We have that with our business.
Yeah.
If one partner should die, he's given the value of his share in money.
Right, as a pretty common thing is that there's some type of buy-sell agreement, or if somebody is to die or to try to sell their interest, this is what happens, and it's done in a way that people are taken care of, and someone's not end up holding an interest who doesn't want to. Yeah, good point. So now A and C own the property together. What doesn't happen is the whole thing doesn't pass to A. Notice that?
Well, it could.
Well, it could, but not this way, but this way. Right, so on this screen, we have a joint tenancy. A and B own property as joint tenants, not tenants in common, but joint tenants. And if B dies, that's the big red X. Sometimes the big red X comes sooner than we think. It came yesterday. We were having kind of an outdoor barbecue, and we had a bunch of friends and kids over, and one of my younger sons ran upstairs and said, "Daddy, the bird is sleeping for the first time." So I kind of ran downstairs and like, this does not sound good. Sure enough, the bird is sleeping face down in the bottom of the cage. And I said, "Please don't say anything to Ellie, my daughter." He runs upstairs. and tells her that the other bird killed it. All chaos ensues. She's bawling. Oh my goodness, I've never seen her bawl so much over that dead bird. I know. So we had a burial ceremony, and then things got better when I went out and got her another one. She was fine. Anyway, so the big red X. If B dies in this scenario, what happens with B's interest? It goes to A. Notice the difference. It doesn't pass to C. It doesn't pass to B's heirs. It goes to the remaining tenants. Now, I say tenants because we are using A and B all the time, but this could be A, B, and C, right? If we have A, B, and C own the property as joint tenants, 3 or more people could own property together. If we have A, B, and C dies, now who are the joint tenants? A and B. If we have A and B dies, now who's the joint tenants? No. A owns all the property. There are no more joint tenants because there's no one else they're owning it with. That was a little bit of a trick there. See, I got you going. You got all excited. A can't be a joint tenant with themselves. So A gets the whole thing. The joint tenancy goes away. But the key here is there's no passing to the heirs in this situation. So why is this important to you if you're an heir?
You know what you can get.
Yeah, you know if you're going to get something or nothing. If you look at how property is held and you're waiting for something to come to you, and then all of a sudden it goes to A, that'd be good to know ahead of time. Yeah. So what I find is a lot of times people try to do estate planning through how they title property, and that doesn't always work well. And sometimes they title property and don't do any estate planning. That doesn't work very well either. Right? So the best thing to do is to let everybody know in writing how property is going to go and then title your property the right way. A little off track, a little more in depth. I get people who create these huge trusts. Like, this is what I want, all the elaborate things I want to have happen to my property. When I die, I want the trustee to hold it. I want him to distribute it this way. And then they never put anything into the trust. So their property is titled all kinds of different ways, and then there's nothing in the trust to manage. So making sure your property is titled the proper way, but doing proper estate planning is a good idea. Community property. This is statutory. In some states, property that's acquired during a marriage is owned as community property, meaning that there's an undivided interest in the property whether the party is intended for that to happen or not. So if you're married and you acquire property, it doesn't matter how you acquired it or what you were thinking, who would own it, it becomes joint property of the marriage, both real and personal. Michigan's not one of those states. California is one of those states. So you get something through somebody else's will. You buy something with your own money, but if it's during the term of the marriage, then that's considered property of the marriage. So here's kind of a summary of all of those real property ownership concepts, and that's about all we're going to spend on real property. And this applies to, these terms apply to personal property also. That fee simple to property, real or personal, means the biggest bundle of rights you can have. A tenancy in common, your interest passes to your heirs. In a joint tenancy, it doesn't. It passes to the remaining joint tenants. And then community property we just mentioned. Yeah?
You're saying any property acquired by gift or inheritance or anything like that is still community property?
I don't know if I go so broad as to say as any, but what are you reading?
Well, it says here, generally community property does not include property acquired before the marriage or
Right.
property acquired by gift or inheritance except property during the marriage.
So statutory. So the first part of that doesn't relate to what we were talking about. If we're talking about if you saw a question on an exam that talked about property that was acquired before the marriage, then that's not going to fall under community property.
Yeah.
If the statute says that it's acquired during the marriage this way, and so that's not, then that's what the statute says.
Okay, so it's very state.
So my generalization about community property being any property, that's important for you to know for the exam. But if you wanted to know in your state what kind of property that's acquired during the marriage is considered community property, you'd have to look at the statute.
Okay.
And I still think it's awfully broad to say if it's acquired this way, then that's not considered community property. Because you'd really have to look at the statute.
Okay. Those would probably be the state statutes.
State, yes.
Okay.
Just whatever state has them. All right. So now focusing in on personal property. What kind of personal property did you guys bring in today? Coat, hat, clothes, laptops, books. Right? What else? Drinks. Anybody bring anything special in today? Bird? No? Alrighty. You know, I have on me microphone, phone. Anybody bring in a phone today? Yeah, maybe a few of you. All right, so those things are all personal property. How did you acquire most of those things? It's always the student says, stole it. Right. Yeah, most of the things that you have here today, you purchased. But what are other ways you may have ended up with the property that you have? Are you trying to get out of here? Is that what you're trying to do? Yeah, you're kind of postured with the backpack on your back, and you've disconnected everything and pulled it out. This is awkward. I feel like you're going to run me over at some point. Yeah? Just give me the signal. I'll get out of the way. Okay. So other than buying your property, how else could you get it? Right, somebody gave it to you. You traded it. You bartered for it. Found it? Yes. We're going to talk about that. What else? Like your case. Yeah. What's that? Capture it. Capture it. What did you bring in a class today that you captured?
It's kept at home, right? I got a wild bird.
There you go. Okay. Yeah. So it's certainly possible. Maybe somebody has a fur coat that they captured. You know, I don't know. So yeah, here, you know, maybe referring to some of the ones up there on the screen. You could capture a wild animal and now it's yours, right? It was running around in the forest, harming no one, innocent, blammo. Now it's dead, like my daughter's bird. So that would be one way. Another way would be to find something that's abandoned. And we'll talk more about what abandon really means. Because just because you find it doesn't mean that it's abandoned. And then the last one, which we'll spend more time in the next chapter talking about, is called adverse possession. Ever heard of squatter's rights? And this idea that you occupy some place that belongs to somebody else long enough, it becomes yours. Yeah, statutory. 15 years is a pretty common one, but it does differ by state and the type of adverse possession. But yeah, that's basically the idea. Is under the specific state statute, if you meet the requirements of adverse possession, something that wasn't yours could become yours. And then production, right? Maybe you made, I didn't hear anybody mention that. Anybody make anything they brought in today? I knitted this shirt.
Very nice.
Yeah, I didn't. But right, doesn't anybody have anything that somebody made for them and wears even though they don't like it? Or Samantha, you get something that you... Nice. Those are always nice gifts. A little personal touch. Anything else? My kids are always coming home. Look, Dad, I made this.
This bag.
Your dad made you that bag?
Yes.
That's awesome.
He works in a factory making furniture. I think that's what that was about.
So that's like a couch.
Yeah, it is. Pretty much.
Awesome. That's cool. So yeah, you could make something. Now, make something, it mentions some examples up there. Manufacture could be one way, or it could be something that's in your head that comes out and now it's something. Like a book, right? That starts in your head, comes out, you write it. Perhaps it's an invention. Anybody in here an inventor? Invent things? I invent things all the time. I'm like, they're showing it on TV. I'm like, I thought of that. But no one believes me. So you take something, you make something else. You find, I don't know, you find a stick in the woods and you make a coffee table out of it. I don't know. A spear, yes, right. You produce something. I don't know, you grow crops. They start as little seeds. Yeah? You do that?
Yeah.
You spear animals or something? No. You speared the animal that made that leather that made you. All right, so gifts. A gift is a voluntary transfer of property from the donor, the one who's making the transfer, to the donee, the recipient, for no consideration. This is useful. Consider having a birthday is some special gift and say this. Here's my voluntary transfer of property from me to you for no consideration. They'll love that. Put it on their card. It's kind of little legal humor. Very little. But basically the idea is you're transferring ownership of your property to someone else and you're not asking them to pay for it. So gifts and contracts aren't the same thing. Where this usually comes up is I'll have a lot of people say a will is a contract. Right? Well, a will is written instructions for something you want somebody to do after you're dead, and people are getting stuff and they're not paying you for it. Right? So it's basically wills, written instructions to give gifts after you're deceased. Because you can change your mind, right? Not after you're deceased, but, right? You write a will, you can change your will. You can decide you want somebody to get some.
Contract to perform then? Because don't you pay someone to handle the will?
Not necessarily, no. No, you could say, I want my wife or somebody to be my personal representative and I want them to do these things, and they may not get squat out of it. They may. And that might be part of your will, is that you want them to get fees to the estate. That's a good thing, but it's not required. In order to give a gift, you have to have these three things. That's my hint. Make sure that whatever you see has these three things. Donative intent. That as you give your property to someone else, you didn't do it with the idea that, hey, you want them to hold on to it and give it back to you, or that you wanted them to pay for it, but that you specifically wanted them to have it for nothing. And it's not enough just to think it. You have to do it. You actually have to deliver, well, I say actually or constructively, deliver whatever it is you intend to give. You can think all day about giving somebody something. That's why I tell my wife, I get home, honey, I thought about bringing you flowers today. Doesn't mean much unless I actually do it. Right? So the last element is acceptance. You have to intend to do it, you have to do it, and then whoever you give it to actually has to accept. Is that your signal? Oh, yes. Yes.
So how come at the Secretary of State when you say somebody gave me this card, no, you got to say you paid $100?
They're looking for proof. Yeah, they're looking for money. they're looking for some proof that there has actually been a transfer of ownership. I mean, you could come in there and tell them anything, right?
Or sign the title.
What's that?
The previous owner could sign the title.
Right.
They still make you put $100 on it.
They still make you establish that it's a sale. You can't gift anything.
You can't like my dad gave me a car, and I'm like, my dad gave me this. They're like, oh well, you still gotta put $100. We're not gonna make you pay the 10%, but you got to put $100 on it.
Interesting. I wonder what statute that is. But you don't have to pay tax on it, right? Like April 15th, you're not going to declare that. Yeah, interesting.
Well, my recruiter back down in Ohio, his in-laws gifted him a minivan for $1 from South Dakota.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always thought that was just to signify. See, ask and run, huh? Signify, show some evidence that it's actually a gift. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so put this in the context of that case, right? In re Estate of Piper. Anybody read that case? What page is that on? 667. If you have your book, turn to page 667 and kind of read it. Don't take a long time, but just kind of glance at what's going on here. So it'll make these elements or requirements will make a lot more sense in the context of this case. By the way, be very careful of your book. I keep having students come to me and say they've been stolen. A lot of people are stealing books. No. You leave it laying for a second, somebody's going to snatch it.
It's just that good.
I think that's it. I'm like, is it business law? They're like, no. It's so common, people are like, wow, I need that. I need to learn about that. Right.
Those are the people who need it.
Yes. I don't know. I suspect they're selling them.
At least they're not stealing like an ethics book or something.
I bet they would. Without even thinking about it.
They're gonna read it and never steal it.
Yeah, right. I bet the students who are stealing these books, well, I don't even know if they're students, but they're not reading them. It really is sad because the students who are getting their books stolen, they have no way to buy another one. All right, so what was the issue in this case? I'll give you a hint. You just look afterwards. This issue here. What does it say? Right. The issue is whether it's an effective gift. And what was the problem? What's missing?
Delivery.
Delivery, right? Maybe there was intent. We don't know. We can't ask her now. Right? That's why it's so important to have these elements, is because it's hard afterwards, in this case, to go back and ask the person what they meant. Right? So, can't you see this? Does anybody have a relative who's being taken care of? And then they're very, very grateful for it, and they often will tell, I've seen this situation in assisted care or nursing homes where they're taken care of, and whoever's taken care of, they're like, thank you so much, I want you to have all my stuff. Right?
Sure you get it written down.
Right. Having something in writing would be good, right? In this situation, what kind of writing would you put together? I mean, see, her problem was she didn't want to give up her stuff until she didn't need it anymore. So if that's the case, if you want to gift stuff to other people but hold on to it until you can't use it anymore, what do you write? A will. So if she had done that, it would have been fine. But now, in re estate a piper means this is an estate case. And who do you think is claiming these rings? Heirs, right? You know, people who felt like they should be getting them. And now here's someone else coming along saying, no, she gave them to me. Well, no, she didn't really give them. Well, she meant to. But we have to have delivery in order to establish that that was actually a gift. What if it had been, you know, here, you've taken care of me, take these rings. And then the donee says, oh, no, I couldn't take them. Well, then it's still not a gift, right? If they don't actually take them, it's not a gift. Now, I've seen this in all kinds of situations. I've seen people walk around and put sticky notes on all their stuff in their house. Right? Like, this is so-and-so's, this is so-and-so's, this is so-and-so's. I've seen people, after somebody died, just clean a house out. And then somebody says, what are you doing with all this stuff? Oh, they gave it to me. Okay, when? Oh, you know, one day Aunt Mildred or whatever said, I want you to have this thing. And so I'm taking it. And then this becomes a huge dispute. If anyone's ever been involved in something like this, it's nasty, right? So you want to make sure that you have all three elements, all of the above. Now, whoops, you may have just thought a gift is a gift, but there are three types of gifts generally. There's a gift inter vivos, which means while living. It's a lot easier to give a gift while you're living. I think most people can understand that. Generally, you know, somebody's birthday, you give them a gift. You're living, they're living. And then I think a lot of people understand the last one, testamentary gift. We've been talking about that. If you want somebody to have something after you die, you write a will and they get it through inheritance. It's the middle one that I think people have the most problem with, a gift causa mortis, which means in contemplation of death. In contemplation of death, not contemplation of anything else. That'll be important to you. This is, I'm going to die, and because I'm going to die, I want somebody to have this thing. Let's say I've just found out I'm going to die of this rare disease. Let's not pick a real disease because that would be insulting to somebody. Let's make up one.
Shish kebabs.
Yes, shish kebabs.
First word that came to
You know, that is weird.
I know, isn't it?
Did you have shish kebabs over the weekend?
I had not had shish kebabs in years.
Just came to your mind. Now you better have one. All right, so, you know, I go to the doctor, and the doctor says, oh my goodness, I haven't seen one of these cases in years. You have shish kebabs. You've got 3 days to live. All right? And so I, you know, loving all of you and enjoying having you all semester, have this Jeep that I want to give to one of you. It's a fine Jeep. And so I'm in the hospital and you all come visit me because you want to know if the final's still happening, right? One of you, I say, here, take these keys. What's that called? When I'm giving you a gift and instead of delivering the Jeep to you, I deliver the keys to the Jeep. It's symbolic. It's called constructive delivery, right? So that's the element of the gift is there. And I'm doing it because I think I'm going to die in 3 days. It's the only reason I am. If I'm not going to die, I need my Jeep. But because I am, as weird as it is, not even heard that there was such thing as shish kebab disease, right? I want you to have it, right? Now, the key thing about this is not only does it have to be in contemplation of death, it has to be imminent death. If it turns out I don't die from that, that goes away and it doesn't happen. The gift isn't effective. Or if I do die, but I die from some death I didn't imminently contemplate dying of, that sounds very confusing.
So, if they make the, or the gift before they die, though?
They have to.
Is it,
Right? It's made in contemplation of death.
is it
So
in the other person's possession?
right. Right. That's the idea. That's the idea, is that you actually have the elements of a gift prior to you dying, and you do it in contemplation of dying.
Then you figure out that you're not going to die.
I know. Isn't that a bummer?
At what point it switches back over to...
Exactly. So when I say the gift is not effective, that seems kind of weird. Let's say then, after I do it, the doctors walk in, my family walked in, everybody says, "Ha! You're on the hit new TV show where we punk people and tell them they're dying of some disease that doesn't really exist." Ha ha ha! And they all laugh, right? And now, is the gift effective?
No.
No, because I wasn't actually dying imminently.
But say they say, oh, you actually got another 6 months to live, then it's just up to the person who gave the gift's discretion.
Yeah, I mean, then I think, when imminent becomes, is that imminent? I mean, I think if it is going to happen, the bottom line here is we're not going to the Secretary of State and saying, "I got this Jeep from my professor who is dying of shish kebabs," right? This is not what we want. But these are the things. Like, let's say I get out of the hospital and I'm walking across the street and you run me over in my Jeep. Well, technically, I didn't die of the death I contemplated dying of, right?
That's what my question was.
Right.
What if you're like in the hospital bed and somebody shoots
Right, exactly. Somebody sends in an assassin.
you? Then it goes back to the heirs.
Yeah, I don't think it's an effective gift. I didn't die from the death I contemplated dying of. Or the roof falls in, or whatever, yeah.
So what if they say, oh, yeah, okay, you can have my Jeep, go to my house, and I'll get the title and bring it over.
Yeah, I mean, if it was you, and I go, "Look, I'm dying of shish kebabs," and you get done laughing, right? You're like, "Yeah, thanks. Sorry to hear you're dying," right? You're going to say, "Not to insult you, but would you mind signing the title?" Because like I said, going somewhere and saying, "I got this Jeep, it's mine," and telling the heirs, "I got it because he gave it to me before he died," that's going to be a tough one, right? Yeah. Basically, the theory here is that this is an effective gift because people really are sincere, because they're really going to die, and so they want people to have stuff before they do. But it's probably not the best way to get something, right? You probably want it through just a gift when somebody's not dying, or if they are, you want them to put it in writing or to sign the title or something like that, right? So, kind of weird. But you know what? I'm not going to do that to you. Your scenario is not going to be I'm dying of shish kebabs, and then somebody comes in and shoots me. Your scenario is going to be something around whether it's imminent or whether it's death. Because what if I'm contemplating dying, not of dying, but of just something really, really bad happening to me? That's not the same thing, right? Okay. It's always fun to talk a lot about dying. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, like my grandparents, they are like giving out their money to us.
Yeah.
Before they,
Yes.
because they want us to see us like have it.
Woohoo!
actually do
I
that.
want you to see you happy.
But like, so since those are gifts, like I get a gift on Christmas or something, and then they don't die of old age, like they die of something else. If like their actual heir, like was like, no, that's my money or something.
Well, I can't give you any personal advice about your situation, but generally, it's not uncommon for people to say, look, I want to enjoy seeing my grandkids or somebody getting the gift. It's not going to do me any good to use it up myself and then not know what happens. The fun part of it is giving it away. basically all we can say is, doesn't it meet the effective elements of a gift? Now, there's going to be people who are disgruntled, right? Because you're going to have heirs who later, when they say, oh, I get the residual of the estate, how much is it? And the answer is, sorry, they gave it all away before they died. That's just the way it goes, right? Not to be insensitive or anything, but if you want to do that and it's your money, you should be able to do that. And there's reasons why you may do that. I mean, there's tax implications to it. There are reasons why you might do that. Yeah.
Well, theoretically, say something happens, you become a vegetable, have to have somebody take
Now we're getting more depressing, right? We're in a persistent vegetative state.
Yeah.
Yes.
So somebody has to take care of you all your life.
Right.
And some people think you're getting gifts or whatever. Is that the irredeemable?
Wait a second. How are you getting gifts? How are you giving gifts?
Well, that's what I'm getting to. Would that be like an irredeemable style, or would that be the keep corpse or keep its mortis?
So if you're a vegetable, how can you give a gift, though?
Well, that's what I was a little confused about. You're not going to be able to do anything while you're in a vegetative state. Do you mean like you do something and then, and now the question is, no one can ask you?
Yeah.
You know, without getting too complicated, you know, this comes up in will situations a lot, where somebody insists that somebody put something in writing before they're unable to know what they're doing, right? Because maybe they end up going into surgery, or they end up in some kind of state where they don't recall what they're doing. So sometimes these estate cases are about whether the person was able to give effective instructions about a gift after they die when they didn't have the mental capacity to do it at the time they were living. And so that's one more issue in estates that you deal with. Maybe not so much that whether the gift was effective because it was delivered or not, but whether the instructions after that would take place after death are even effective because the person didn't know what they were doing at the time.
Whether the donor had the mental capacity.
Right. Yeah, because you know we talked about intent and intent being donative, but if no one can even establish that you even had the intent, you know, somebody in the estate may raise the issue of, no, they never had the intent to do any of this. They were just made to sign a piece of paper and they didn't even know what they were signing. So that's another issue, yeah. All right, so those are the normal ways people get property or get property. These two are a little more confusing. In fact, one of them is called confusion. The first one's called accession. You take something, remember my example of finding something wood and making something else out of it? Like if I found some wood, driftwood on the beach, and I made some fancy furniture out of it or something, or seashells and made jewelry out of it, right? I would hate for somebody to come back later and said, I own that beach, therefore I own that jewelry that you made, right? So in some situations, through accession, we take something and we make more of it, and therefore it becomes ours. But that doesn't always hold up. Like you can't break into a lumberyard, steal wood, make a cabinet out of it, and now because it's something different and more valuable, it's yours, right? So you can't do it without having a right to do it. Think about taking your car in for repairs. I'm finally biting the bullet. The M-Tech wants vehicles that are a good project for students to work on, and I'm going to give them my Jeep. They're going to be busy a whole semester with this thing, right? I mean, if there's anything that could go wrong, this has got it right now, so it's going to be a great project. But let's say I take it in and it has very little value, but when it comes out, it has all these things fixed. Basically, they've increased the value of my stuff. Does that make it theirs? No, it doesn't. Well, right, I'm not giving it to them. I want it back. Let it be known that right now I'm not giving it to them. I want it back. I want it to be better than when I gave it to them. Yeah, you take something in, they add something to it. That's not what this is about. That would be a bailment, right? Giving them your stuff, they fix it, they give it back to you. And then confusion has two of my favorite words in it. Commingling and fungible. I just enjoy saying those words. Commingling means mixing your stuff with someone else's stuff. Fungible means you can't tell the stuff apart. So when you mix like stuff together, like water, oil, grain, now you can't really tell whose is whose, right? Think of it, I'm not a farmer, but an elevator, silo, right? Where you co-op, am I using the right words? Anybody do any farming? You dump your stuff in with someone else's stuff. Let's say you put in 5 bushels. That's probably not very much, is it? With someone else's. Now you can't tell your 5 bushels from theirs, right? But what's your share of it? 5 bushels, right? It's just different. So confusion is when your stuff is confused or mixed up with someone else's stuff, and what you get out is the share that you put in, but not necessarily the same stuff. Does that make sense? It's kind of a weird way of getting property that wasn't actually yours, but you get your share back out. All right, lost, mislaid, and abandoned. This is fun. My classes sometimes get so excited about this, I have to tell them to settle down and be quiet or disturb the class next door. Lost, mislaid, or abandoned. Let's use your textbook, because we've been mentioning that as an example here. Let's say you're walking to class and you have your book in your book bag. It falls out without your knowledge. You get to class. I say open to in re state Piper. You reach in your book bag. Your book's not there. Is it lost, mislaid, or abandoned? Lost. It's involuntarily left someplace. You didn't intend to leave it there. It fell out. Now you can't find it. So the status of your property, it's still yours. And whoever finds it needs to hold on to it for you, and depending, sometimes it might even be statutory, they have certain obligations as they hold on to your stuff or what to do with your stuff. Well, whatever it is, money's a little harder to trace, right? Whatever it is, it matters how it got there. That's the point of this exercise. If it was genuinely lost, like let's say someone walks out of here, and as they walk out of here, a bunch of money falls out. This happened to me. I don't know if I mentioned to you, I had my wallet in a sweatshirt at the movies. You know, I had it in my pocket, and I got kids and popcorn and pop and all this stuff, and I just like quick shoved it in my sweatshirt pocket. Bad idea, right? I'm in the movies, it falls out of my pocket onto the ground. I go to walk out, I realize I don't have my wallet, and somebody took it. Somebody, before we could even get out of the movie theater, somebody saw it in the aisle, picked it up, and took it. Was that lost, mislaid, or abandoned? It's lost. I didn't tell you the facts where I was sitting in the movie theater playing with my wallet and I set it down there and then forgot I put it there. It fell out. So somebody took my wallet and converted it to their own use. They really needed to get it back to me. It would have been very easy to get it back to me because I was in the movie theater. They could have easily figured out who it was. Mislaid. Let's say you do make it to class with your book, and I tell you to open up to this case, and you're reading, and you become so interested in today's topic that you get up and you're conversing with your neighbor on the way out. Wow, oh, wasn't he awesome today? Man, he really just drove that point home so well. Man, he's so good. Man, and you leave, and then all of a sudden you're somewhere else, and you realize, where did I put my book? It's sitting back here on the desk, right? Lost, mislaid, or abandoned? Mislaid, right? You voluntarily put it there. I didn't put it there. You didn't drop it there. You put it there. Now you can't find it. I always wonder what's happening with my remote. Is it lost, mislaid, or abandoned? You know? I think my kids mess with me during the day and they hide it from me. But generally, I think I know, at the time I know I put it there, but now I can't figure out where I put it. So mislaid property, it's voluntarily put there, and whoever finds it is a steward for it, and you're still the true owner. You don't give up ownership by mislaying your property somewhere. And sometimes the context of how you find stuff, it's pretty easy to figure out which one of these it is. Let's say you find somebody's briefcase beside the counter at a dry cleaner. Probably mislaid. Why?
Because they're usually going to take it with them.
Yeah, they probably came in with all their stuff, set down something, right? Gave the dry cleaning, and then they walked out. What if you find a jar of money buried in your backyard? Hard to say, right? Like if I'm going to abandon money, am I going to load it up in a jar and bury it? I don't know. I might just spend it, but
I'd say mislaid.
it's probably a good chance that somebody intentionally, it didn't like get lost in a hole. You know, you're carrying the jar around, whoops, falls, and you're like, where'd it go, right? So it's probably somebody did voluntarily put it there. And here's the thing, it might not be any of these. They might know where it's at, intend to come back for it. So it's not like they can't find it, right? Like think about a boat on the side of the road. This is an actual case. Guy's driving down the road. He sees a boat on a trailer on the side of the road. Lost, mislaid, or abandoned. He doesn't know. It probably wasn't lost. It probably didn't flip off the back of somebody's car and land perfectly on the side of the road. It probably wasn't mislaid. Like, where did I put my boat at? You know, I remember setting it somewhere, but I just can't remember where I stuck it. But probably not abandoned. I mean, like, if you're going to abandon a boat, are you going to hook it up and drive it out on the highway and set it on the side of the road? I don't know. Yeah, just like push it out in the water or something. But anyway, so he, not knowing which of these it was, but knowing that if somebody didn't want it anymore, he wanted it, he calls the police and says, hey, I don't know if this is lost, mislaid, or abandoned, but can you try to find out who the true owner of this is, and if they don't want it, I want it? And so guess what happened? The police took it, and they stored it, and then guess what happened when the true owner never claimed it? They sold it and kept all the money. Because there are statutes that say if property gets seized and nobody claims it, then you can do these things with it. Right? So he never ended up getting it. But in theory, on the last one, if you discard something, and when you do, you know right where you put it, and you don't want it anymore, you are relinquishing your title to it. You're saying, I don't want this anymore. I don't want to own it. And then, in that case, whoever finds it gets to keep it, and they get title. So that's the key difference in these three, is with the first two, you don't give up title, and you're supposed to get it back. The last one, if you truly abandon it, then you don't want it anymore, and someone else can claim it. I almost did this with my Jeep one time. One of the times I blew up the engine. When it kind of stopped on the side of the road, I thought, ooh. I was like going over Market, like Market along the river there. It seems like, I run by there sometimes, or bike by there. I'm like, this is a great place to abandon a vehicle. So sure enough, my vehicle blows up right there. I'm like, I wonder if I should just leave it here. You ever see that? You ever see cars on the side of the road and they have a sticker in the window? What's the sticker for?
Probably a ticket.
It could be. It could be saying, hey, look, you're not supposed to have this here, and we don't know what you meant by putting it here, but we're watching it, and if you don't move it, we're going to move it for you, right? So if somebody truly abandoned it, what are they going to do? Leave it. They're not going to come back after it. Now, the moral of the story isn't leave class and pick up anything you find on the side of the road, right? Because it may not be. If you find a boat on a trailer on the side of the road, what could actually be happening?
Flat tire.
Yeah, somebody has a problem. They left the boat there, and they're coming back for it. Don't take it. They may not have abandoned it.
But don't call the cops either.
No, I wouldn't. I'm saying, because you don't, like, if you see a car on the side of the road, do you just pull up and go, well, looks like somebody left this here, I'm going to take it?
If they're, say for some instance, someone put a sign that says, I abandoned.
Yeah. I mean, in our neighborhood, there's a grill, right? It's at the end of a driveway. It looks nasty, and it has a sign that says free. So what do I think?
It's free.
I think it's free, and I'm going to take it. Now, later, the guy's like calling the police on me. It was just bait to see if I'd steal his. I'm going to argue the facts appeared as if it was truly intended to be abandoned. Now, that doesn't mean I run all around the neighborhood and every time I see a grill that's not secured, go, ooh, free grill, and take it. Really, I don't do that. There's a lot of nasty grills out there, but that doesn't mean everybody wants to abandon them. All right, bailments. So I think we talked pretty much about what an abailment is. A bailment is when you want someone else to hold your property and you want it back. Has anybody ever engaged in a bailment? Well, no, that's not a bailment. Right, I gave you one example. You take your stuff in for repair, you expect to get it back. Come on, think about it. Anybody ever flown anywhere and checked their baggage? No one ever. Yeah, so that's a bailment, right? You give it to the airline, you expect to get it back, subject to inspection or whatever. What else? I mentioned dry cleaning, right? You don't take your clothes in there, and then when you come back to pay for it, they're like, oh, we thought you were giving those to us, right? You know, they think their job is to make them clean and give them back to you and get money from you. So that's a bailment. What else? Right? That's a good one. Anybody park their car in a parking garage? May or may not be a bailment. Like sometimes there's a sign that says, hey, go ahead and park your stuff at your own risk, but if something happens to it, not our problem. We're not watching it. Other times, take a ticket. The terms of the bailment are on it. Anybody ever check the coat? Anybody ever valet park their car? Like the valet doesn't take off and go, oh, I thought you were giving this to me, right? So there's many, many situations where you entrust. Anybody ever let their friend borrow their car? All right, so anything that has to do with personal property where you give it to someone else to hold on to without intending to gift it or transfer title to them, but to get it back is a bailment. You can't bail your kids, so bailments can't be humans, and you don't bail real property. Right, you're using their vehicle, and you've got to give it back. And you might hire a moving company where that moving company takes your stuff and moves it, and you should get it back when they're done with it. So yeah, there's multiple bailments. You take your dog to the vet or kennel. All those things. Stables, there's many warehouses. Those are all bailments. Someone else is holding someone else's stuff. Right, the bailor, it says the property must be returned by the bailee to the bailor. So the bailor is the one creating the bailment. The bailee is the one who's holding on to the stuff. And this is what you need. It has to be personal property. You already mentioned that. You have to deliver the property. It's not enough to think you want to create a bailment, but you actually have to give the airline your luggage. And there's some type of agreement. Sometimes they even put terms on it, right, with your luggage. Like what they're responsible for, what kind of treatment they're going to give it, when you should get it back. And one of the reasons why we care what type of bailment it is what kind of duty the bailee owes. Now this one you're going to see soon. What it says up there is there's such thing as a bailor benefit bailment, a bailee benefit bailment, and a mutual benefit bailment. Like the first one. You give your stuff to someone else, but the reason you're giving it to them is to benefit yourself, not them. Let's say I'm going to fly somewhere and I don't want my car sitting outside, so I ask my neighbor if I can put it into their garage. They're not charging me for that. They're not going to do anything other than give me a place to put it. That's called a gratuitous bailment. So what duty and care do they owe the vehicle while it's sitting in their garage? Low. Right, there's a diagram in your chapter. It's coming up here, but it kind of lays this all out. If they're just holding your stuff for your benefit, then they owe a low duty of care to it. Let's say your neighbor says, can I borrow your car? Now, if that's the case, then it's for their benefit. They owe it a what? a high duty of care, a great degree of care. They need to get it back to you in the same or better condition. Which sometimes, the issue is if somebody damages the vehicle or whatever, right, then they need to make it right. Versus, let's say your car is in your neighbor's garage and they're just doing you a favor, and somebody breaks into their garage and does something to it while it's in their garage. What duty do they owe? Low, unless they broke into their own garage or they gave the thief the information to get in there. It's not their problem. The most common one is a mutual benefit bailment. When you leave your car at a shop, how do they benefit? Money. They get, they're going to get paid for it. You benefit because you give back something hopefully better than what you gave them. In that case, they owe a reasonable duty of care. Sometimes that's up to a court to determine if it was reasonable or not. Yeah, here's the sliding thing. But everybody see that one? Do that one more time if you weren't looking. It's kind of what the sliding scale looks like, right? With reasonable in the middle, pretty common mutual benefit. If it's an airline, it's the dry cleaner, it's the car shop. Those are all mutual benefit bailments. All right. A bailee can hold on to the stuff. They have a right to hold on to the stuff. They should get compensated if that's part of the agreement. They could use the bailed property if that's part of the agreement. And they have a right to limit their liability. They get to say, yes, we'll hold on to your coat or whatever, but here's our limitation to liability. Right? They get to do that. But they're supposed to get you back your stuff in, depending on what type of bailment it is. They should give it back to you in the same condition that you gave it to them. If it's a pet, it should have been fed, watered, whatever they do with pets. Pet them, groom them. And then the bailor, the one who's given up the property, they should get their stuff back. That property shouldn't be sold off to someone else. If it's a repair, it should get repaired. They should be free not to be limited by liability, which basically means they're not going to create a bailment. And the last thing is, let's say you loan someone your car. Depending on what type of bailment, usually that's for the benefit of the bailee. If you know there's a problem with it, you ought to let them know, right? Someone asks to borrow your car, you know it doesn't have any brakes. I'd say don't lend them the car. But if you did, what should you tell them? Yeah, watch out. It doesn't have brakes. They're probably not going to borrow it then, but you'd have an obligation to know. And without going through all these exceptions, basically the idea here is that if you have a common carrier, think about all the trucks driving down the highway. All those trucks don't own what's in the back of them usually. And they're liable if something happens to it while they're holding on to it. They could argue that with something beyond their control, if they're able to establish that with the court, then maybe one of those would be a winner. But generally, if somebody's shipping something for you and they damage it, they're responsible for it. That's the general rule. And here are just some examples. Warehouses, those are bailees. Innkeepers, although I haven't heard it called an innkeeper in a while. Hotels, motels, inns, right? Why is an innkeeper a situation of a bailment? Because sometimes when you get a room, you put your stuff in the room, right? Or you have them hold on to your stuff. What do they usually tell you if you have valuable stuff? Right, put it in the safe. And then they have keys to the safe. Anyway. All right, insurance. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. In fact, there is a exhibit in your chapter that's going to get at a lot of the stuff that I'm wanting to know about insurance, and it relates to the clauses that are in insurance policies, and there's another one about the different types of insurance. Okay. So one of them's on page 679, and then there's another one. What's the one that has the clauses on it? Like incontestability clause. Anybody find that one? Page 682, yep. So if you know those two, you're in pretty good shape. As I mentioned earlier, insurance is a contract. It's really a contract that reallocates risk. You guys have risk. What kind of risk do you have? Risk that you're going to die. We've talked about that one, right? What's the risk that you're going to die? 100%. Hate to break it to you today. Maybe you're having a good Monday, and now I just told you you're all going to die. The question is not if you're going to die. The question is when and how. So that's what insurance is about, right? There are people whose job it is to figure out when you might die, right? And what kind of factors would they consider? Health, how old you are, where you live, right? Like I forget where I was in. I think it was in Chicago, downtown Chicago, and I was watching these pedestrians, like standing in the middle of the street on their cell phone. I'm thinking that has to affect their chance of dying. Like if you lived in a rural area where people didn't drive like idiots and you didn't stand in the middle of the road, I bet you'd live longer. I couldn't believe it. Or people on bikes like going the wrong way down the street delivering something, like you're going to die. But anyway, so I think where you live, what your job is, right? There are some jobs that are more risky than others. Right? So that's what insurance is about. This bottom one here talks about all risk insurance. Sometimes there are insurance policies that say, hey, whatever the risk is, we're going to insure it. But generally the law says you can only insure of risk that you can really contemplate. Be creative. Isn't there some risk that probably isn't insured because no one has thought it would really ever happen?
Russian roulette games.
I certainly could. There's a risk that a certain population of the population is going to shoot themselves, right? Usually not covered, right? Well, what kind of risk? Like it mentions terrorism. When did that probably become more of a risk that people thought about and accounted for? 2001, right? After 9/11, then it was a big issue. And the companies that said we insured for all risk didn't think that was a risk that was going to happen. Now if you own a tall building, depending on where you're at, that's a pretty common thing. I don't know, maybe like alien abduction. I think after the first time it's documented it really happens, then people will be concerned about it. But until then, I don't know. Like there's been some floods and tsunamis and things happening that before people probably would have not contemplated happening. All right, I'm not going to go through all these. I do want to though hit on where's the clauses at here? Clauses. This one, that exhibit that's in your chapter. Anti-lapse has to do with how long your insurance policy can go unpaid before it lapses. Appraisal has to do with either insuring that at some value or claims and how much the claim is worth. Arbitration clauses, believe it or not, your insurance policy probably has an arbitration clause in it, which means you agree in advance if you have a dispute with the insurance company, you're not going to court, you're going to arbitration. Incontestability clause, after a certain period of time, the insurance company should not be able to contest what you put in your application. The application usually becomes part of the contract. Why would people be dishonest about what they put in their application? Right. I don't smoke. I don't do this. I don't do that, right? Here's my real age when it's not really. Or it might relate to having multiple insurance policies and the extent of coverage that you have under one of them. All right, and then the last one I want to mention is the defenses one down here. I kind of have a jaded view about insurance. I kind of feel like insurance companies make money by not paying claims. That's kind of my jaded view. My father had an experience of this, like he paid the same insurance company 20 years, and then he had a small claim and they wouldn't pay it. And he thought, I can't believe how much money I paid. And I tried to tell him, Dad, it's contracts. If it's in the contract and it falls under the contract, maybe they're still not going to pay, but you're going to be able to enforce it. If it doesn't fall under the contract, they're not paying it. They're not doing you any favors. They don't care how much money you've paid them. Right? But some of the defenses they might raise are that they shouldn't pay the claim because you're committing fraud or you did. You misrepresented something in your application. Or the last one up there, that yeah, they do cover those types of claims, but your harm was not a result of that. Like the old, your house was actually destroyed before it was flooded. Like if you have flood insurance,